back to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. This time, Barbara Barnett is back. It's the Season 3, Part 1 recap. She's getting together with Jimmy-Jerome. They're going to talk about the first third of Season 3. Was it as bad as we thought? We'll see what Barbara thinks. Speaking of people talking about things they think about and writing about them, the Quarterly Book Club. Check it out. It's quarterly. Why? Because books, they're busy. You're busy. Books are long. Some books are also busy and long. And in 2018, the theme, historical fiction. Third quarter, I might stop reading scripts and just start reading books. This book, the third quarter of the year, it's The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu by Joshua Hammer. To save ancient Arabic texts from Al-Qaeda, a band of librarians pulls off a brazen heist worthy of Ocean's 11. In this book, The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. That sounds awesome. It's got to be a movie, right? Maybe I'll just wait for the movie. But no, you shouldn't. Read the book and hook up with Samantha and her friends, the Quarterly Book Club. Also, we were talking about Barbara Barnett. Someone else who talks about TV, Jerome. Jerome's TV reviews. There's so much TV now. It's out there. It's streaming. What to watch. You don't have time. You don't have time. You were living a life. You got to pick. You got to be selective. Jerome's going to help you out with that. Well, telling you what to. He's a chief television critic for Seat42F.com and a contributor to Blog Critics Magazine.
Blog Critics Magazine, where Barbara Burnett is executive editor.
Exactly. Hey, it all ties together. So, speaking of Barbara and all that, let's get on with it. It's the Season 3, Part 1 review on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. This is Jimmy-Jerome here, and I am with, once more, Barbara Barnett, executive editor of Blog Critics Magazine, author of The Apothecary's Curse and Chasing Zebras, an unauthorized guide to House MD. How are you, Barbara?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. So, we are into Season 3.
Oh my god, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
I mean, honestly, we're further ahead than you. I know we were talking the first 8 episodes today. We've actually recorded the first 13 already, and it's not as bad as I expected it to be, which isn't to say that it's good, but there are some decent episodes, but even the worst episodes aren't the worst of the series yet.
Well, I might disagree, but...
Ooh, okay. Well, I will just say that the worst episode of the series for me is still Season 1, Tomorrow is Yesterday. Nothing has knocked that off its perch.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see.
So what did you think of these first 8 episodes?
Spock's brain, to me, was the Jump the Shark episode.
Oh, that's the worst of the season so far.
Oh, my God.
Easily.
Oh, my God. It was horrible. It was really horrible. So I did not like it at all. I liked the Enterprise incident a lot. So you have like the worst of Season 3, this part, and the best of Season 3, this part. So like back to back. And yeah, that's all I can say. I did not like much of this, and I'm going to confess right now. I also did not like And the Children Shall Lead.
Absolutely horrible.
It was horrible. It was like Miri retread.
Only worse.
Only much worse. Those guys, those kids, holy crap, those kids were scary.
Yeah.
And I also really detested the Paradise Syndrome.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
I hate those episodes where, you've got, oh my God, it was so obvious that the Native Americans, which I know they weren't called back then, but holy moly, I mean, really? I hate those episodes where everyone falls head over heels for Kirk, which I could never quite figure out.
I mean, I don't hate Shatner. I like Shatner, but I think sometimes he overacts.
I don't hate Shatner.
And sometimes, I know we've talked before, but I think sometimes he overacts, but sometimes he's pretty decent. I do think Season 3 we see a little more of the overacting. But yeah, he was not good in the Paradise Syndrome, which is just a bad episode, period. No, I did not like that. And is there no truth in... I mean, I like Spock episodes. It wasn't the strongest episode. It's funny, Diana Muldaur, so she was like everywhere in the 60s and 70s. She was like everywhere, and it was like because of her eyes. She is to eyes in the 60s and 70s what
Cillian Murphy is to eyes now.
Yeah,
Speaking of which, I just saw I always dislike him because he always kind of scares me with those eyes. So I don't usually like, because he really scares the hell out of me.
Oh, he's creepy. He's really creepy. I agree.
And he's like one of the creepiest actors. And I've seen him interviewed, and he's just lovely. I mean, he really is lovely and Irish. And so I saw the movie he did. It's a movie he did in 2007. And this is not totally off topic, so
okay.
Bear with me.
Sure.
It's called Sunshine. He did not scare the bejeebers out of me in this movie. He's actually quite good. And makes me, and it's like sort of, you could see the influences of Kubrick. And the effects are so cool, and you kind of compare it to, early Star Trek, and it's like, okay. But it is a really, really good, and anyone who likes Star Trek probably would really like this movie and probably has never heard of it before. So it's a very strong recommend for me. I haven't had a chance to write a review of it, but I think I'm going to.
So yeah, you've mentioned 7 of the 8, or 6 of the 8, just in passing, and have kind of separated them. I kind of see so far these 8 as 4 decent ones and 4 bad ones.
So what do you say?
I mean, is there in truth no beauty? We actually have as number 1 for the season so far. It edged out the Enterprise incident for us.
I really liked it a lot, and I would rank it 2.
So we've got the top 2, just reverse there. And then of these 8, the third one we've got is For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky.
Yeah, I don't remember really buying the McCoy Natira thing.
Oh,
I don't think that.
Definitely some issues with the episode. I mean, we are in season 3, so good is relative. But, I mean, I just liked seeing McCoy go front and center a bit, even if it was kind of not the best story.
Yeah, Oh, it's funny because I'm looking at some of the commentary here. The Star Trek novelist David Allen Mack said, "I simply didn't buy the romance between McCoy and Natira."
I bought that. What I had issues with was the timing and everything, and him giving up his life on the starship for, I don't know, it just didn't all work out all that well.
God, they were always doing stuff like that. Mostly it was the guest stars, though.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you sad that they were all standalone episodes, because the McCoy Natiri thing could have been really cool if they'd taken more than 45 minutes to try to rush through it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And that's, that was part of what things were like back then. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything was a standalone. You do have some, with Spock, and maybe that's why I like the character of Spock more than any of the other characters, is with Spock, there is a certain amount of character development over the course of the series, over the 3 seasons. And you see him mellow out in a lot of ways. There are some season 3 episodes that I actually liked a lot, but beyond this one, but we'll save that for the next.
Get to those when we get to those.
We get to things like the Tholian Web and Plato's Stepchildren and the Empath. Some of those I actually liked a lot.
Well, yeah, that'll be the second batch we talk about, but I can tell you all 3 of those, because we have watched them, rank below these top 3 for us so far.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, is there in truth the Enterprise and For the World is Hollow? They're the top 3 of season 3 thus far.
Yes.
So, and then the other decent one, I think, from this first 8 episodes is Day of the Dove, the Klingon episode.
Yes. I agree with you. And I'm going to refresh my memory because I remember this episode. See, you know what my benchmark is. If I remember.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I've seen all of these multiple times, but it's been quite a long time since I've seen them. Mm-hmm. And if I remember the plot and find the episode itself memorable, then there must be something good. If I absolutely have no concept of no memory of it at all, that's always going to be a sign that, yeah, not so much.
But did you have memory of Spock's brain?
I did, but none of it was good.
So that's not a surefire way.
No, but I remember. But see, I remembered the thing with Kirk and the Native American woman as being just horrible.
Yeah.
And I remember that all these years later, because I think that's one I never saw again. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm not going to watch this one again. So I do like the Kling. I mean, I like any episode where there's Klingons.
Oh, yeah.
Not because I like Klingons, but because they add a lot of tension to and energy to the show.
See, I like the Klingons. I feel like these Klingons, it's hard to like these Klingons because they're so two-dimensional and they're so superficial. But the more we've learned about Klingons through Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise and now into Discovery, the Klingons are such an interesting and complex species. And I think they take some of the hints for that from these early episodes, but it was more like retconning, stringing together things from these episodes to deepen them rather than they already had that complex idea in their head.
And what I remember liking so much about Day of the Dove, and now that I've read through the summary, I remember that this was like one of those episodes where it was like, okay, we figured out what the problem is, and now we have to have an uneasy alliance with the bad guys and get rid of this mutual enemy because he was feeding off of it.
Yep.
Yep, and I really like that. Now that I've read the summary of it, I totally remember this episode, and I remember it being notable for that. So, yeah, I did. Okay, I would definitely rank that up there.
Yeah, like I said, we're already 5 beyond these 8 in our watching, and other than Plato's Stepchildren, which did crack the top 5, these are 4 of our top 5 for the season so far. Like, they're decent. Yeah, Plato's Stepchildren did crack the top 5, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Which we'll talk about more in our next get-together. But then the rest of these that we've watched ahead fall in the middle here, and then the bottom 4 are the other 4 from this first 8. I think there's 4 really bad episodes here at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was because they saw the writing on the wall.
I don't think it's that necessarily. And the thing that kind of boggles my mind is a lot of times we view some of the season 1 and season 2 episodes as being good, and then we think Gene meddled with them and ruined them. And Gene wasn't meddling in season 3, so we can't even say it was him stepping away. I think there was lower budget, there was a rush, there was less consistency. There wasn't as strong an overarching leadership.
No, and they moved the series to Friday nights by then.
Well, but that shouldn't affect the quality.
No, but I think they were all sort of one foot onto something new.
Yeah.
You have to imagine.
Now, I will say I think both the Alternative Factor and Tomorrow is Yesterday from season 1, both of those rank lower for me than all 4 of these. But there's nothing in season 2 that ranks lower than these 4. These are just bad.
Yeah, this was the weakest season, and it's like we're 19. What are we in 1968? We're in 1968 now, and I think they could have done a lot more, and they were trying really hard to comment on the angst that was pervasive in this country, the division, the angst, the war in Vietnam.
I think Day of the Dove does that pretty well.
It definitely does. And I think that they were trying really, really hard, sometimes too hard, to make a comment on it. And I think that they weren't successful a lot.
Sure.
The whole I'm not 100% sure that they were, sometimes they were more successful than others. Mm-hmm. And I think that more of that success came in earlier seasons. I don't think there's a lot in 68. I'm trying to think.
Well, I have not seen this episode ever, but I would think that Let That Be Your Last Battlefield might be one of the more successful ones of this era. But I haven't seen it, so I can't say for sure.
Okay, now I'm going to peek ahead, and I'm going to remember.
That's the guy that's black on one side of his body.
Yeah, I was
white
just
on the
thinking,
other,
okay,
vice versa.
I was trying to remember the name of that.
Yeah.
And
I bet that's one I'm really looking forward to watching, because I've read about every episode, but that one I haven't seen.
Frank Gorshin, totally amazing in a dual role. Mm-hmm. I think he's a dual role. He plays a dual role.
He does?
And that was around the time where we all knew him as the Riddler.
Right.
In Batman.
Oh, yeah, I've seen the old Batman movie. I love it. Frank Gorshin does not play a dual role in that episode. There's a different actor playing the other character.
There's a different... Okay, see how long it's been since I remember.
But that's okay. That'll be the second batch of episodes as well. We're saving that for a live episode at a festival that's coming up. So
cool.
That'll be in our second batch. But back to these last four.
Batch. Okay.
So yeah, I think Spock's brain's the worst of these last four, and the Children Shall Lead second worst.
Yes.
But then before we get to Paradise Syndrome, we put Spectre of the Gun down there. That's the OK Corral.
Oh God, yes. And you know what? Again, it's of its time, right? You had, what was the biggest stuff on television? Bonanza, The Virginian, Gunsmoke, High Chaparral.
It makes sense for them to do a Western, but this one, first of all, they had no budget, so they couldn't take them outside to film it. They had to use backlot sets with red background, to make it sort of surreal. It was...
Yeah.
And the plot was just so full of holes.
Well, and anytime they tried to parallel something in actual U.S. history, I think except what is arguably the best episode of the entire series. But
The City on the Edge of Forever?
Generally, they did really badly when they tried to do this.
Yes, but City on the Edge of Forever was not a parallel. It was actual time travel, and the time travel wasn't the point of it. The love story was the point of it. So yeah. I wouldn't lump those in with all the really bad parallels. But you're right. The parallels for the most... I think the exception that I would think of is Plato's Stepchildren was pretty good.
Oh, when they... See, to me, that's different.
Okay.
Because they were going into ancient history.
Right.
Right. They weren't trying to go into modern, what at the time was, even though most people alive wouldn't know the 19th century, but... within the realm of American history. All right, I'm gonna.
So you mean like the Nazis and the mobsters and those episodes?
I still remember the one. What was it with the American flag? And
oh God, that one was the worst. That was really really bad. And the thing about that episode, though, and I'm trying to remember what it was. I know it was season 2. I know it's near the bottom, but it wasn't all the way at the bottom because that episode was really good until that last 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That became a totally different episode.
It did, and that really ruined it because it was, like I was saying before, they were trying to make commentary on the times. And that was a really, really, really good example of it. That was ruined.
The Omega
by
Glory.
The closing scene.
The Omega Glory is the name of that one. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So that one we had a really hard time ranking because we're like, man, 35 minutes of this were great, and then 15 minutes of this were terrible. How do we balance that out? Luckily, we didn't have that trouble with these episodes. These episodes were pretty consistently good or bad. Yes.
No, I totally agree, and it's funny because as I was looking at them, and then I went on AV... the AV TV Club, and I kind of compared my own rankings or where I graded them with theirs, and I was like, hey, I was exactly with them. So that was pretty good. But yeah, so, okay.
If you look at the IMDb ranking, And the Children Shall Lead ranks below Spock's Brain, which I would disagree with.
Yeah, okay. I see, I didn't like And the Children Shall Lead just because that guy was just really,
I didn't like it either, but I think Spock's Brain
gave me the creeps. Just gave me the creeps. Really did give me the creeps. He reminded me of the captain on Gilligan's Island. Too much.
Yeah.
But he was really creepy, and the kids were even creepier than him.
Here's something criminal, though. On the IMDb rankings, they have Spectre of the Gun. Up above, Is There in Truth No Beauty? And up above... a lot of stuff. Up above, For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky. Spectre of the Gun's pretty high up there on their rankings for season 3.
That's interesting. Okay, so now I'm curious about what the AV Club says about it, because we were sort of...
I mean, IMDb rankings aren't very good, in my opinion. I've looked at them before, and I tend to disagree with a lot of them. Like, they have Foley and Webb ranked really high and Plato's Stepchildren really low, and I'm just like, no.
So they gave the Spectre of the Gun a B+.
Really?
Yeah. This is what... You want to know what they said? Can I say what they said?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. Spectre of the Gun isn't free of plot holes that have plagued the season. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Style, strong concept, and that makes it a winner. It's the only episode of the third season this is the writer, can remember watching before as the set of the half-finished Tombstone, Arizona, really stayed with me and when I was a kid. I was worried it wouldn't hold up with the story, and the story cheats a little. We're not dealing with blah, 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 blah. We're not dealing with another race of godlike beings, which they really overdid, especially in the third season. That's me speaking, not him.
I was going to say, and also the first, but...
and also the first. They do their best to hide or ignore the limits of budgets and effects of
I mean, what I agree with there is it was interesting and surreal as a concept, and they could have done something really cool with it, but they tried to treat it as so straightforward at first, where they were like even concerned about screwing up the timeline or thinking they were on a fixed timeline, except, everything was red, there was no sky or whatever, and the buildings were half finished. You could see through the walls and so it's like, you should double down with the surrealism. Don't try to work it in a non-believable way.
Well, I mean, one thing I did like about it, and I agree with the AV Club on this, was the arrival in Tombstone. They're the Clan gang. I mean, it's kind of a cool thing in its own way.
We did think, and you can correct me, I'm not sure, because my history classes were obviously quite different than yours, because our schools
I did European history. I did not do a lot
Oh, you didn't do anything with American? I was going to say, because all of the Star Trek characters seem to know the story of the OK Corral very well, and I'm thinking, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we didn't know that story very well. These guys grew up hundreds of years later, and then I was trying to think, from their perspective, how many of those, like, certain battles or events on that small scale of family versus family do I know from the 1600s? None. So it didn't make sense to me that they all knew it.
So Kirk is supposed to be like a history buff, right?
Sure, so he would know it, but why does everybody else know it?
They wouldn't. And that's actually another flaw of Star Trek, is that they put them in situations that most people, like in historical situations. That's the other thing I don't like a lot about the history-related ones, not the ancient ones, because we know ancient history. I mean, everybody studies ancient history. They wouldn't necessarily, hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, know like modern American or even 19th century American history.
Sure.
So yeah. So I think that's the other thing that kind of bugged me. I think you're right about that. But you have to kind of, so they're doing it from the perspective of writers in the 1960s, writing about this within their context, and what would it be like if?
And see, that's
where it's kind of a fan wink. But
that's where I see the limitations of the imagination of the original series writers, because there are some things, and I'll give Gene Roddenberry credit for this, that he really envisioned tricorders and transporters and some things that were very futuristic, but then other things they just did not. I mean, Shore Leave's the one I get them on. Shore Leave, where all of their references are just common things from the 60s people would know, whether it be Alice in Wonderland or The Black Knight or whatever. And yes, I'm still kind of aware. I was still kind of aware of those growing up. I don't think today's children are as aware of those as much. And these people that grew up in the 23rd century should not have been aware of them at all. And there were no references from anything beyond 1960s on. So every once in a while they'll mention there are a couple of historical names, like Zephram Cochrane, for instance, that they'll bring in that took place in the in-between history, and I get really excited. Yeah, our future, their past. And I get really excited when they do that, and they've done it more than just Zephram Cochrane, but it happens so rarely. I really feel like it should happen a lot more often.
No, you're totally right, and I think it is a problem. And I know that's one of the things I'm really conscious of when I'm writing, is that if I'm writing and my new novel, the one that's not yet published but is finished, is there's time travel involved in it. Spoiler. Because the blurb of it does say a future Chicago. We just don't know that it's real or it's all in my main character's mind.
Okay.
But he envisions, let's just put it this way, he envisions a future where Chicago very much looks like Chicago does right now, but there are things that are different. But we don't know when Chicago in his mind is frozen and if it's real. But I really thought about that, and I thought about putting in things that would be not within my main characters, within Galen's, you read the first book,
yes,
within Galen's own understanding of the modern world, like the 21st century world. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but it's something I am cognizant of, and it's something that did bother me about Star Trek. And maybe subliminally, what bothered me about Star Trek really kind of makes me be more mindful of my own writing. Mm-hmm. So how about that for a rationale?
Well, I've got the It's All Been Done Radio Hour, which is part of this network, and it's I've got a universe journey science fiction series, and sometimes most of the stories are pretty original, the characters are pretty original, but sometimes I poke fun at Star Trek, and I could not resist doing a shore leave type episode where the audience would not get any of the references because they were things that our characters were familiar with from their pop culture rather than ours.
Right.
I mean, right. It takes a little. It was honestly a little bit difficult to write because I'm like, how do I communicate what's important about these characters to the audience without spending a bunch of time on exposition because our characters don't need it. But I think that kind of thing. That I agree. That's something that hopefully is.
And that's right. And that's something that when people. So I'm writing in the 19th century, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that my characters know that the reader isn't going to be aware of, but I can't give exposition because I write, which isn't a screenplay or a script, but it's in limited third person. So anything, you can't explain something to somebody that already knows.
Right.
So very tricky thing in writing. But
what we're saying is we wish Star Trek would have done a little more of that. But to be fair to them, in the 60s, I don't feel like any writers were really doing a lot of that.
No.
Not any, but most.
And I think science fiction writers now are much more mindful of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Which makes the science fiction so much more cool.
I mean, I think there are some great examples of classic sci-fi, but I think they've learned from the mistakes of the past as well.
Right. I mean, and again, as you said, you have to give Star Trek credit for its premonition of the tricorder communicators.
I'd say the thing that bugs me the most is all of those freaking buttons.
Yeah, well.
I mean, I get it. I totally get it. But we have more power on our cell phone now than, is displayed on the Enterprise bridge. And it's the Enterprise computer. And so it's a little bit like, But, you have to look at it through the lens of 50 years ago. And compared to its peers, Star Trek did better than most.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It did a lot better.
Not that it really had a lot of strong peers, but... Yeah. And it's a lot harder to criticize the writer who did not have all of the all of the examples we have of good versus bad. Well,
its peers were My Favorite Martian and Lost in Space. So Star Trek's peers were the really truly awful Lost in Space.
I mean, it wasn't quite on at the same time, but I'd say if you want to look for good science fiction, some episodes of The Twilight Zone, and that was before Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean that's Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits.
Yeah, so I would say those peers as well. We should keep in mind, right? Even though they're a different type of show.
Yeah, they were a completely different type of show. I mean, that was an anthology series where every single episode was a mini movie, and those two shows, particularly The Twilight Zone, stands up against the test of time. I mean, you can watch The Twilight Zone now and be truly creeped out.
I really would like to sit and watch that series from the beginning one day, but I've seen a bunch of episodes, and some of them are kind of forgettable, but a lot of them were really good. I mean, Doctor Who was around in the early 60s.
Correct. We had Doctor Who. We had Space 1999, which was great. I loved it. Martin Landau. Very, very good. You should check it out. But there were a lot of, there were some out in the UK. There was a bunch of stuff. But Star Trek definitely compared to a lot of those. And I'll probably, because it is a contemporary of the show, I would say The Prisoner, which was a different kind of show, but also science fiction was better in many ways than Star Trek was. So anyway, we digress, but not digress.
So as a whole, these 8 episodes, inferior to seasons 1 and 2? That's fair to say? Yeah. A couple of them would probably jump into the middle of the pack of season 1 or 2, but I don't know that there's...
The Enterprise, I would put the Enterprise. I really liked... So again, I like the Enterprise incident because, I love Spock episodes.
Sure.
And I absolutely loved the really pretty subtle attraction, even though Spock was play acting.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that bothered me about her. I love the Romulan commander. I wish they'd given her a name. But I thought she was too trusting of him.
Well, she was really attracted to him.
I understand that, but even after he betrayed her, she still didn't put him under lock and key. And then you're like, really?
Well, but she understood that what he was doing was, and that was, I think, part of what she liked was the fact that he had that honor. Mm-hmm. Which was, it's a trait that Romulans share, but also there was something different about that pointy-eared guy that was very different than the Romulans.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea that Spock's attraction to her went beyond, obviously Romulans and Vulcans are related, that he really was, saw beyond it and really respected her in a lot of ways.
I would say, off the top of my head, I'm thinking she's probably my favorite guest character from these 8 episodes.
She was great.
Joanna Lumley? Was it Lumley? Or whatever.
She was also everywhere during the late 60s and 70s. She was in everything. She's a really good actress.
Joanna Linville, I'm sorry.
No, not
Joanna Linville.
Linville, not Joanna Lumley.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's absolutely fabulous, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely fabulous. Right?
Yeah, Joanna Linville. She's probably my favorite of these 8 episodes. I love that they had such a strong female character in 1968, which is something Star Trek could not do every week. I know they tried to put a female first officer, and the network said no. But I like when they did manage to work in some strong female guest stars. They weren't just all swooning damsels for Kirk to sleep with.
They did. Yeah, and they got a lot of female, lead guest actors as were females. You had Diana Muldaur.
They had her twice. She was in 2 episodes. She was great. And, of course, she came back for The Next Generation for a season.
Right. And then the episode, The Empath.
Yeah, that's coming up.
I know.
She's fantastic, that woman. I can't remember her name, but yes.
Yeah, so they had quite a few strong female characters, as strong as female characters could be.
Yeah.
So cool. So a 50-50 sort of.
Yeah, but I do think the top 50 for the most part are middle to middle upper of the first 2 seasons. I don't think. Even Is There in Truth No Beauty and the Enterprise Incident, which are both, I think, overall great episodes, aren't going to crack the top, 2 or 3 of seasons 1 or 2.
No.
When we get to the end of the series, I'm going to try to press you to give me a top 5 of the series, but that's not this episode. So
I'll start working on it.
Good, because we are going to take a minute when we finish the series to try to look at it as an overall thing before we move on to the next batch.
Of course, if you ask me which episode had the most impact on the future of Star Trek,
what would be your answer?
Well, it would have to be The Way to Eden.
We have not watched that one yet. Is that the hippie?
Yeah.
I have not seen The Way to Eden either. That's one of the... I have not seen all of season 3, so I'm seeing some for the first time, which is exciting. I mean, like I said, I read the Nitpicker's Guide. I would read the Star Trek Encyclopedia cover to cover. I've read about every single episode extensively, so it's not like I'm not familiar with these. But, when I was growing up, they weren't all readily available on streaming service and DVDs, so I had to read about them rather than watch them.
Yes, I understand. All right, well, cool. So yes, half good, half bad. I like the Enterprise incident.
Mm-hmm.
I liked.
Is There in Truth No Beauty?
Yes, I like that one.
That one. So titles, real quick. That Is There in Truth No Beauty, and For the World Is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky might be two of my favorite episode titles of the series.
They're great titles.
I mean, I think they're ridiculous, but I love them so much. I like when they do those, very weird titles.
They do that. They're very literary. Requiem for Methuselah.
Yes.
I mean, Let That Be Your Last Battle. They had really, really good, memorable titles.
Some of them. Who Mourns for Adonis? Not a great episode, but a good title.
Good title. Right. Absolutely. Now, the only thing is, the Paradise Syndrome and This Side of Paradise, not good to have two.
Two Paradise titles?
Too close. Anyway.
And in my opinion, neither one good episodes. So.
Oh, now see, that's where we disagree.
I know. We've got This Side of Paradise almost at the bottom of episode. It's 5 up from the bottom of season 1.
I loved that episode. I remember almost every scene. It's emblazoned in my memory. So anytime there's a really good Spock episode, except Spock's brain.
Well, that's not a really good Spock episode. That's just remote control Spock.
It's like a horrible one.
Oh, it's bad. I mean, that's the episode they always hold up as the worst of Star Trek. And I have to say, I expect it to be worse. I really did, because for me, Return to Tomorrow, not Return to Tomorrow. Tomorrow is Yesterday. See, there's two titles with Tomorrow in them.
I know, right?
Tomorrow is Yesterday with Captain John Christopher. That one made absolutely no sense and was such a mess of a story. That is still my least favorite by far. I found that one unwatchable.
Yes.
So for me, Spock's Brain, and I'd say I like Spock's Brain better than the Alternative Factor. I might even like it better than Charlie X. But there's nothing in season 2 worse than, because the bottom of season 2 is Catspaw, and Catspaw's better than Spock's Brain. So
yeah,
I'd say Spock's Brain's in my bottom 3 or 4.
So do you know what Leonard Nimoy said about Spock's Brain?
What?
He said, quote, "Frankly, during the entire shooting of that episode, I was embarrassed, a feeling that overcame me many times during the final season of Star Trek."
I don't think we can end on any better note than that.
I agree. Leonard Nimoy from the beyond.
Well, enjoy watching the next third of season 3, and we'll talk to you here in a couple months.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks.
Have a good summer. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Or fall.
Not summer. Have a good autumn.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?